I've created a new site in Dreamweaver called Fluid Grid Layout and copied into the site root the images and scripts folders. You can find these in the Case Study Assets folder in the Responsive Web Design folder of the course assets. The first step in creating a fluid grid layout in Dreamweaver is to design the grid. To do so, go to the File menu, select New, and then select Fluid Grid Layout. Dreamweaver's Fluid Grid Layout set the breakpoints for mobile at 480 pixels wide, tablet at 768 pixels wide, and desktop at 1232 maximum width. You can't change these breakpoints in this dialog box, but you can change them afterwards in the style sheet if you want to. By default, Dreamweaver assumes that your mobile layout will be based on 4 columns, tablet on 8 columns, and desktop on 12. Often these are adequate, but you should make sure that they're really suitable for your own layout. Although it's technically possible to change the number of columns after you've started building the page, it is much better to have the right number of columns to start off with. For the desktop, I plan to use exactly the same basic layout as I had for the Pacific Highway case study that I used earlier in this course. Let's just have a look at that layout. You can find a copy of page_layout.jpg in the Case Study Assets folder. This was designed for a fixed width of 1200 pixels. On a mobile phone, all these articles and the sections in the bottom will be stacked on top of each other. But in the tablet layout, I still want to have these 3 sections at the bottom. And if we look back at the grid, by default Dreamweaver has 8 columns in the tablet. My 3 sections aren't going to fit into that, so what I need to do is to change that to 9. In the mobile layout, they'll all be stacked on top of each other, so 4 columns is fine, and in the desktop, 3 divides into 12. That works out fine. This field underneath the mobile layout, 25% of column width, that sets the gutter between the columns. The valid range for this field is a number between 5 and 100, but 25% for the gutter is fine. Beneath each of the layouts you can set the width of the page. I think that the default of 91% on mobile is a little bit too generous. I want to change that to 100%. And I'm going to do the same with tablet. But I'm going to leave the desktop at the default 90%. Whichever values you select, Dreamweaver always puts a little bit of extra padding on either side of the main container. Dreamweaver will remember the new settings the next time that you create a fluid grid layout. If you decide you want to go back to the default, then just click this button here. But I'm happy with the changes that I've made, so I'm just going to click Create. And Dreamweaver prompts me to save a style sheet. So I'm going to create a new folder called Styles, and then call this fluid.css, and then click Save. Dreamweaver then creates a basic page. Need to save that. File, Save, and I'm going to call that index.html, and then click Save. And it then reminds me that the fluid grid design requires the following dependent files: boilerplate CSS and respond.min.js. And it says they'll be copied to this particular site. Just click OK, and there we are. If you look in the Related Files toolbar, Dreamweaver has added boilerplate.css, then the fluid.css, that's the style sheet that I created, and then this respond.min.js, which is a file that makes sure that older browsers will understand the media queries. And then there's one thing I want to do before I start building the page, and that's to change this script source here. It points to googlecode.com. I'm going to use my local script, so I'm just going to click in there, and I'm going to change that to scripts/html5 shiv.js, and then I'll just save the page. The reason I'm using a local version of the file is because if you use the Google Code version, it isn't cached. And this particular script, HTML5 shiv.js, persuades older versions of Internet Explorer to apply styles correctly to HTML5 elements. So that's the first step in building a fluid grid layout. Dreamweaver uses fixed breakpoints of 480 pixels for mobile phone layout, 768 pixels for tablet layout, and a maximum width of 1232 pixels for desktop. You can't change those values in the new document dialog box, but you can set the number of columns for each layout and adjust the percentage width. You can also adjust the size of the gutter between columns. When you create the page, Dreamweaver prompts you to save a style sheet. It also attaches a boilerplate style sheet and an external JavaScript file, both of which are copied to the site root.